You are listening to Key to the Bridge, brought to you by your friends at Keystone Therapy and Training Services, where we will be sharing human stories, talking about community resources, mental health, and wellness. This is a podcast for everyone. Welcome. All right. Welcome to Key to the Bridge. I'm your host, Erica Bosque, and I will let my guest introduce herself in just a second, but definitely want to welcome everybody as we have a conversation today about entering parenthood and what that looks like in 2023 and what it's always kind of looked like and what we've got going on. So I'm going to let us get started. Go ahead, Miss Becca, and introduce yourself and let us know who you are in our community.
Thanks, Erica. I am Rebekah Wheeler. I am a nurse and a certified nurse midwife. And I, over the years of working around birth, have really become a postpartum, in particular, postpartum healing expert, which unfortunately was partly because of a dearth of that. And that's part of the conversation. As a nurse midwife, I have helped people in pregnancy and labor thousands of times, and only in having my own son, who's now 7, did it really sink in the cliff that you're dropped off when you go home from the hospital in our culture. And so it's sort of keep it alive, feed it is just such an insufficient amount of education for the many things that your, frankly, body, mind, spirit relationship need to get through this intact and empowered.
Yeah, and Becca, I have to acknowledge, when people just say the word postpartum, there's a reaction. There's a reaction, right? And I don't have the same reaction when people say motherhood, or even the same reaction when people say pregnancy. It's very much the after, and I think partly because I don't know if you ever leave it,
right?
I don't know.
I'm still postpartum forever.
Yeah, which makes sense because before you had a kid is before, and then there's after.
Yeah,
and I also think too, right? I think the different iterations of what happens after you bring children into your life and family is something definitely under discussed. And so my first thought literally goes to the idea around, you just mentioned, being in the pregnancy and birth world. And when you are now in the time that we're in, starting to see families before the babe is here and what they're doing that is kind of working or not working before, and then what leads into kind of the setup of that postpartum phase for new parents.
Yeah. I think there's a piece of it. It's on so many levels. On a cultural level, we don't really have a ton of model for how to move from prenatal to birth to postpartum as sort of one continuum. Certainly, you can see partnerships and families and support systems prenatally where you're this person's pretty set up. This family's pretty set up. It is getting more and more rare to be these are people who are, well supported with a lot of people around, being realistic about the expectations, reading and learning enough but not too much. And really the thing that I feel is rare to see prenatally and rare to see the transition in is these are people with practice, listening to their own intuition. We've become a culture that's I have a question about how to help my baby sleep more, or even, my kid the other day has hit a wall of indecision. And what we have been taught is go see what the experts say, see what someone you follow on Instagram says. We don't have a source of truth, and we go and we look and we piece it together. But there's a step that we've fallen out of practice with as a culture of being and what lands for me? Even for me, the practice of being okay, I actually do want to read a few articles that pop up when I Google this, but then I have to sit with which of these things sound like me? Which of these things sound like my kid? Which of these things will work for my family? I remember when my son was a couple months postpartum reading one of the birth tomes that you're supposed to read, like in the postpartum sleep piece. And it was like, you must do this, you must do this, you must do this. And just this sinking feeling of guilt that I had already totally messed it all up. And I feel like that's unfortunately, whether it's with birth or postpartum, like the feeling most people feel when something is hard. It's like, I messed it up. I didn't do enough. I didn't do the right classes. I didn't prep my body right. Rather than sort of being like, everything's going to be different for every family. Feel in until you find the answer for you. We're not practicing that.
Which is just, makes me itch my head.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just mind-blowing to me to get that distanced from something that is first, right? Like actually biology, like it actually exists within your body for that whole process to even start. And then how quickly the detachment from like your physical body, but then also too from your emotional, mental health, your spirit, like that, how quickly that happens. And I think about, I'm just thinking like even from my personal experience, right? As the pregnant person, how quickly I just become a pregnant body and I'm not a person.
Right. You're a piece of a statistic, and you're being pushed around into statistical categories.
Correct.
And recommendations are made based on data, but like we're not right here.
No, we're not. Yeah. We're not here together. And that my value, like as a being, right, is now second, third, fourth, fifth above the person that I'm carrying, which I get. Right. And there is also too a difference. This is my personal opinion, but when you knowingly enter that, wanting to enter that world, like deliberately trying to become a parent and become a pregnant person and like doing all of that work to like have that happen. And then you get there and then they're like, cool, good job, backseat. Like you, I mean, maybe you have a seat, maybe you don't even. Like, and so like that process starts really, really quick.
Well, and it's interesting because for folks who are so deliberately trying to get pregnant that they're in the fertility treatment world, you are so just a number in an algorithm there. You are you have a uterus that someone would like to have a pregnancy inside. And your personal experience of that, your emotional experience of that is very ignored. And then there's the other extreme where it's like an unintended pregnancy, an ambivalent pregnancy. Suddenly there's this sort of, we got to figure out what's best for the baby. We got to figure out what's best for the baby. The sense of like being completely kind of obliterated and invisible is intense. And it's part of it is this is our medical system. Is there's very little, here's what the data says. You're not a data dot, though. Like in every average group, there's going to be some outliers. And to be really honest with that as a medical provider, that's like a friend reached out to me today who's pregnant and was asking about the recommendations for induction for someone who's 40 or older. And like she was like, I've been told I should be induced. Literally, her provider had not said anything about why. Like as though like a 40-year-old body can't keep being pregnant. And to like say to her, okay, well here the recommendation is based on there is a sort of doubling of the stillbirth rate in this time. But let's talk about what those numbers actually are. And then you sit with those numbers and you see if you're comfortable with that. And because having induction is not nothing. She knows enough to be like spontaneous labor versus labor that started for you are very different experiences. There's a medical reason for a lot of people who are getting their labor started for them. But like you said, the get the baby out safely becomes way ahead of the experience of the birthing person. And we act like as long as there's a healthy mom and baby, as the phrase often goes, that's all that matters. You know, like, and that makes people feel invisible. And going into postpartum feeling like not that you were sacrificed. Your experience was sacrificed. And I don't mean a cesarean birth. A cesarean birth can be so necessary, but like you were obliterated in the process. Then you're trying to build yourself back up while you're not getting any sleep and having a screaming baby all the time. Like we're giving people putting them in like a deep hole and then being like, don't sleep for 6 months and have no support. Have fun. I wonder if they'll get postpartum depression or anxiety. Hard to say.
I have postpartum depression and anxiety just hearing you talk about it and relive it. I feel like this is right now is not the moment to sell making children and deciding to have them. It is. It's because it feels that way, that now there is a knowing of like what is going to happen to the birthing person. And the way the dynamic is set up is that if you have another person who's involved in the process with you, that person too, or people, are also involved in an experience that's different than when birth happened in the home and a family and community were all kind of exposed to the process and what is going to happen, right? Like I think about the way my grandparents would talk about how they were all born at home and like what that process and experience was like for them. For my grandpa and my grandmother, talking about it from a different perspective versus now there's a lot of like rules. There's like a lot of rules and you know that you are kind of immediately be putting in a situation where your intuition or even like your feeling of power in what's about to happen to your family isn't necessarily yours.
It's happening at you rather than sort of alongside or with you. And I am a hospital midwife. I believe in the hospital birth model, partly because there are people who risk out of home birth and people for whom that isn't going to feel the safest.
Yep.
You know, like you should give birth where you feel and are safe. And I believe in home birth when it's appropriate. I believe in hospital birth when it's appropriate. But we have lost something in hospital care, which is really centering the patient and their family. And there is a subtle difference. There is a belief among providers that if I came to you and I said really honestly, like your blood pressure is going up, I can't know for sure whether that means you're going to develop preeclampsia. The statistics say you probably will. And even if you do, mostly you wouldn't get pretty sick. But if you did get pretty sick, you and your baby are really at risk. And so there's a national recommendation that anyone should give you that we start your labor at this point. Like that is your choice to make. I'm going to see if you have questions, leave you with some time with your partner, call your mom, call your friend, call your doula. You make the choice. And if the choice is no, we're going to have to talk through what those risks are a little bit more. And if the choice is yes, then let's talk through what to expect over the next few days. There's a belief that if I do that, tons of people will say no. And let me just say, after years of hospital practice, no. They're going to say yes, and they're actually going to then, however it goes, have trusted themselves. I lay the seeds that, like, this is their body and their baby and their choice. And this is their family's experience, and I'm here to support it. I'm here to keep them safe. I'm here, it's very different than being like, so we're going to need to induce because if we don't, there's a chance your baby could die. Like, that's just, you're like, I guess I have to say yes to that, but I have a dropping feeling in my stomach and I feel yuck and I think you don't really care about me. Like,
and that's the part where, you and I, we can geek out on like the mental health, part of what it is that we're talking about here, and that human connection around being in parenthood and that skill building of trusting my ability to figure things out and who my community partners are who are going to help me in this process, right? And of like figuring out who I am as a parent, right? And it starts at the beginning. Right? People ask like, oh, when did you know you wanted to be a parent? I'm the person who walked around with balls under their shirt as like a 3-year-old. Yeah. Could not wait.
Same.
Love them. I can't. No, I'm not kidding. There's photos. We should share them. Walking around because I just couldn't. I was enamored from being very, very small about babies and being a parent and all of those things. So I like could not wait. That is not necessarily the experience of, I would say, a good chunk of people that they decide in their life that they want to enter this. And then people are like, well, when does it start? It starts when you know that this is going to be a thing. Mm-hmm. And what you're going to do with that and your relationship.
When you know you're pregnant and you show up for your first visit, and all it really is them talking about the things with your lifestyle that you're doing wrong, maybe.
Oh, well, yeah.
The labs you're going to do and the ultrasounds you're going to do. Part of that, I mean, providers are working so hard. We are working really hard, and the system is not totally for us.
Oh, not even close. I mean, what you have like I always think about the average is like you're going to be there for less.
You have
than
a 15-minute slot allotted, and really in that time you should also do your charting. So it's 10 minutes with the patient.
That seems like enough time, Becca. 10 minutes.
10 minutes is plenty.
10 minutes is
to really get deep. And I might only see you once, and then you'll see someone else in my practice because we don't have continuity because it's no way of life. And to say that part of what we're trying to build, to say prenatal care is really just about catching whether you're getting sick or not. So if you're not getting sick, a little bit, we're just here to keep looking. To say, is there a way to build a little bit more time in to be like, what's really coming up for you? What's, what are you needing? The system's not there. And part of what people love about home birth and working with midwives home birth is the hour that you have with them, is the relationship building. But you're right. Part of what it's building that I think is so important is a belief that the answers are in you. It doesn't mean that part of the answer isn't to read a book or a blog or a list of recommendations. Yep. We don't learn to do things without experts on some level. Becoming parents in the last several years, and certainly in COVID, has felt bleak. And the heartache of providers and nurses sending people home from the hospital, knowing the just lack of support system, that the tiny, flimsy support system we had that collapsed and is just trying to rebuild a tiny bit after COVID. But there's also something kind of beautiful happening in the last few years around healing work, which is we're finally starting to dawn on people that the therapy and the therapist are not what help people heal. Whether, it's coming from within us, that healing is in us. I mean, there's a very literal level in which that's true of if you have any vaginal tearing with childbirth, your only job is to just keep it clean and not really stress that area because your body will heal. I often say to people the mucosa, that is that tissue, is like the inside of your mouth. It you could bite the inside of your mouth, and as long, keep your tongue away from it a little bit, and in a week it'll be great. Your body can heal, and to believe that your mind and psyche and relationships, and ability to love your baby and also do, that is such a huge thing. Yes, I think showing up for therapy, whatever kind it is, with whomever you trust, is a huge thing. But I believe it's because you actually created space for yourself. You actually found someone you trust and welcomed them into your life. You actually told your truth in your story. Them saying the right things is, an important piece. But I think, above a certain threshold, it's really just about feeling comfortable and having a safe space that you created in your life for yourself.
I mean, I think a lot about why people now in particular, right, are I need a therapist. And right. I'm okay, yep, those are people who are trained in a lot of different modalities of what it is. But most people who get in to even when you're talking about any type of human service to care for people, at least I should speak for myself. The reason I'm in it is because to be in space with people is important. Sometimes even in your role, right? I don't even say a whole lot. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't say a whole lot at all. So if that is the case, right, of we're thinking about accessing people's ability to know themselves so that they can figure out what it is that they need and even if we're even like before healing, like, what's before healing? Before healing is what the fuck just happened.
Yeah.
Like yeah. And if there are kids in the car while you're listening to this, I apologize for the F-bomb. But it's the real word, because like I think sometimes too, we have a speed at which we want to get to that.
Right.
We want to get to that. And we need to first just even land in the experience that we just had. And yes, process it and all those things too, but like how it's going to live in you, and like where you want it, like how it's going to live in you, so that you can then even consider what it looks like to do anything with
there's
all
an important piece if we're talking about parenthood and transitions to parenthood, or even adding a kid to your family, where if you have done that by giving birth or by your partner giving birth, there is a literal what the F just happened. Like, just to honor, and I love birth. I have chosen to be around birth as like my calling and career.
You're in it all day.
It is wild. It is bonkers. And I had been at 1,000 births when I gave birth, and it was bonkers as an experience. And like, it made me kind of honor more. I mean, I understood cognitively all the pieces of what were happening, but to just be like, no, guys, for real, this is wild. Like,
for real.
For
like,
for
just
real.
Clear, I thought I knew.
You think you know, you don't know.
Now I know.
But that bonkersness has the potential to make us feel incredibly proud of ourselves. And that doesn't just mean if you had an unmedicated squatting birth. It doesn't just mean if you went into labor spontaneously. You can have a labor that goes very sideways and needs an unplanned cesarean, and you bleed extra. And like, you know, like, it is not simple. And you can feel so proud of how your body showed up, of how you showed up, of how you and your partner or your family showed up. Like, if basically when we have a little t traumatic experience, which is anything, this may sound like birth to some people, anything where you feel overwhelmed, a loss of control, and a sense of fear for the life or safety of yourself or someone you love. It's like, you know, maybe every birth. It's just, that's what it is. We go into, at some point, a like fight or flight response. And the sense of like what just happened and shakiness, people will shake. Or our fight or flight response might be to sort of leave and dissociate. And you see people immediately postpartum who cannot hold the baby. They cannot look at their baby. They wanted that baby. They love that baby. They cannot feel it because their system is just... And to honor that, there's also people who like sort of get all fawny of just like, I love my nurses, I love my doctor, everyone's great, I thank you for everything. And you're like, I don't know. It's a real response. I think you're kind of freaked out. Like, it's okay. And to just honor that part of what we do not talk to people about is how to come out of that. And poor partners, like, who are they've just watched, even if everything was totally normal, 90% of partners are like,
no, I mean, that...
You know, like, they don't know what they're about to see. They haven't even maybe watched some of the videos the pregnant person watched. Like, it's just...
And there's that other side of it, right, where you experienced the bonkersness as an observer. And so there are things that person in the room observed that the
other person doesn't take in.
It might not have even known.
And you don't get the same wash of hormones that's going to help you forget most of the tough parts. No. The other person just like, no, I just witnessed a car crash. Like, everybody's okay.
So
but,
it's interesting you say that. Like, I think about getting ready for today, talking to my hubby Ryan, and he was remembering, which is true, after we had the twins, he came home, and after the microwave would beep, which happens a lot after you have children, right? You're cooking like a lot of things. Yeah. It sounds like the machines. And I could cry about it. In the hospital room, and we were talking about it last night while we were in dinner, and he's still... You could see it in him, and I did
send him my way. We'll go on a walk
together, right? But like, and I did with the twinnies. I had preeclampsia. I was still able to like have a vaginal twin birth and like all of the all of the amazingness. But the amount of beeping that happened for 5 days.
Beeping is not great for our nervous system.
No. so much beeping. And so he's like, sometimes I still hear the microwave and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Well, and I want to honor for people. So my work that has come now is beside my midwifery practice is working with people who have had difficult or traumatic births or been at difficult or traumatic births. Sometimes that's partners. Sometimes it's the doula, the midwife, the nurse, the doctor who's just like, yeah, something beeps in my system still going. For providers, you walk back in that room 2 weeks later and you're like, oh, nope, still here. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything went wrong. It's just the intensity in the room, for whatever combo of reasons, went high and stayed high, and nobody came back out of it. And so my work has become working with people one-on-one briefly, like 1 to 4 sessions, to just be like, how do we tell the story, kind of complete it so that your system can come back down and you can, like you said, figure out where that lives in your memory and your body. And there's simple things. Like I was just doing postpartum rounds this morning, and there was someone who's like 2 days postpartum and kind of like big eyes, and like, I was like, how's resting going? Like, no resting. On paper, this was an uncomplicated birth, like, but it's a subjective experience. It's when you're overwhelmed, and overwhelmed means such different things to different people. And you can't, it is not a lack of sort of strength or resources that leaves someone overwhelmed. It just is.
Well, and it's weird to think that we're going to do these types of things and that there is not going to be a reaction of some kind.
That you could just go through that, and then once your baby's crying and you're on postpartum or you're home, you're just going to be like, it's not how it works. It's not how it works. You have to, like, part of this is just hacking our brains and our bodies, is we are flooded with stress hormones, and our body will not clear them if we don't do certain things. And so knowing, I like joke around, I wish there was a practice after people give birth of like, as soon as they feel ready for it, like just putting on loud music and like shaking. Like it's like a toddler. You know how a toddler will like, they have to thrash. They like need the thrash to get out of their system.
Definitely haven't grown out of
if you give if you let yourself shake. I mean, I know people who go to the tops of mountains and scream. I know plenty of providers who get in their car after a difficult shift and blast music and just like roar. It is good for your system. And you, like a toddler, will have the moment where you're like, and you can feel that. And after that, you're ready for like snuggle up and like calm down. And then something that people really, really need postpartum that our culture does not totally offer, partners need it too, is the space to just tell the whole story from their point of view. Not with caveats of like, of course the nurse was great, but like also not great. And, like where you're talking yourself out of it, or like well, the last thing I wanted was a cesarean birth, and I got a cesarean birth, but like it's totally fine because the baby's good. Like, no. Honor all the feelings that you had. Let them all surface. We get scared to have our feelings because we think they'll never go away. But like research after research after research is like feel it and then we release. Again, toddlers. Like we are just big toddlers.
And to what you were saying earlier, right? Like that our culture right now basically has rules around like where you're allowed to do that or who you are allowed to do that with.
Yeah.
And therapists, right, or mental health providers
place, right,
or whatever else, whoever these people are, that's the place that I have to go get this. And then the waiting that sometimes happens, like, right, in order to be able to get to that safe space or person to do that. Yeah. Also, too, is where, in my opinion, like the worry lies around the harm with that, because you have just had a child and there is a real thing around like the first 90 days after you have a kiddo, and there is, right, like you're tethered in a lot of ways. And so like, how are you going to get those things?
Literally, how are you going to get it?
How are you going to get it? And everyone involved, because, right, if you have more children in your house, it is interesting them to watch them do what, like, some of what, like, I can remember watching, like, my kids, I wish I could do that right now. I can't do what you're doing right now, but I really need that. Like, for example, 2-year-old son had the twinnies. I don't blame him, man. I did bring home one baby. I brought home 2 babies. Not happy. iced me, like, right, for 2 weeks.
Right.
He just didn't want to talk to me. And I think about how many people probably after something like that, the birthing person or the partner, don't really want to talk to anyone.
Yeah. You just kind of want to ice the world.
You know what I mean? Like, you just want to kind of go. And what happens? No.
No, and you're supposed to tell the story a million times, but then that also reinforces whatever you're telling. And if you're not telling your whole truth, it reinforces that feeling of not telling your whole truth, like, which does not feel great inside. If anyone has a person in their life who can be present and objective and non-reactive, go, like, ask that person to come by and just be like, yo, auntie, yo, best friend from high school, like, I don't need your joining. I actually don't want to hear your story right now. Like, but I just want to tell the story of how I felt, and I don't need fixing for it. Being able to do that sometime in the first, few days, ideally, few weeks, it shifts things so much for people. So much.
And I just keep going. I'm thinking too, like, everyone who's been involved in that intense experience, like, needs a place for that.
Right. And it is lovely to have a lovely partner. Your partner is not the person, because they're in it too.
They're having their own thing.
And it's better to talk to someone who isn't sleep deprived. And
yeah, it's like
sleep deprivation is not helping the situation. And you're supposed to go back to work. That could be a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
but
you're on a clock too.
Yeah, that like you are meant to be healed by X date. And all of this really is to say that taking the time to like finish digesting the birth experience is a step to really helping you show up. And if you can get to the point where you have processed a difficult experience, whatever difficult means for you, and it becomes a source of, I know how to help myself. I knew how to get the help I needed, whether that is talking to a therapist or getting the right friend or writing it in a journal, or, like I know how to help me. Then when your baby's 6 weeks old and having a growth spurt and up all night, you have this anchor. It's the anchor I wish everyone could have from birth itself, which is like, I can do hard things. To look at your partner and to be like, we can get through hard things. It really helps. And if you have unresolved trauma from a difficult birth, instead the message to yourself is, I failed. Like, our bodies and minds, unfortunately, part of how we have been trained to make meaning, especially those of us raised in this culture as women, is to figure out what you did wrong. Like, if you had a cesarean birth you didn't want, you should have done more of those exercises that your friend sent you 6 months ago and you didn't do them. And that's why, or you didn't push hard enough, or your body couldn't protect your baby and you didn't grow a good enough placenta, or like whatever, you couldn't keep the baby in long enough. What's the thing I did wrong? And sometimes the gift is just saying that out loud so the shame comes out of the shadow, like some sunlight diffuses shame. But also so that you can hear the reality check too, of just like, okay, I am holding this. And if what I'm holding about my birth story is I couldn't do it, then it's hard in the tough moments of new parenting to feel like you can do it. There's still the opportunity to be like, birth tried to kick my ass, but I got there. Or, I went through all that trauma and I figured out how to heal it. And look, this is, this will prepare me for when my kid is 5 and having difficulty with reading. And I know how to do like a long process of finding solutions. There's like good places to put it in terms of what it teaches you about yourself. But we just ask people to plow forward and find the silver lining, and all's well that ends well. And it is not helpful.
No. And we now have enough information to know that it's not.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that the amount of that still existing is challenging. Because I think that's also part of it too, is the juxtaposition of different environments that is really, really hard. And so if you are going into, right, the really like Western medical model for care, there is like a practice too of like having to even gear up for what that experience is going to be like, and like what you're going to get from it and how you're going to use it and things like that, and how that's, where do you even go for that? Like, right, you go, I mean, because now I know there are, I think about the amount, if we're going to use social media as the example, of the amount of posting and sharing that people will ask, like, well, what do you think I should do with this? Or like, how should I use that? Or whatever, like having some sounding board of like, how do I use this experience to like help, to help me,
Right.
or to at least not do any harm.
Right.
And then afterwards, it's even more challenging because you have kind of the blind leading the blind, like of like what you were just
Right.
talking about, right? That you're asking people doesn't mean you do not have important and amazing things that can be contributed to you. But if everybody you're asking is in the same spot, then it's hard to figure out like what those systems of support and care look like, and having the we're going to get into this metaphor, like kind of like the compasses that can help,
Right.
you know what I mean, you through what's going on. Because that's something I see a lot. Like if you go out and, you know, gotta love a Saturday park expedition and you're around people and you hear, you know, parents talking about where they're at and where they're going. And the tone of what it is exactly what you're saying is, I'm not doing it right, or this is wrong, or I'm not trying hard enough, or I need to do more. And like, that's the tone. And, you know, then you and I show up at the park and we're these weird squeaky wheels that are actually like, hey, you know what?
Like,
You're doing
great.
You're doing great.
Doing awesome.
It's Saturday at 8:47 and you and I are at the park.
Like, yeah.
Because
we are great.
Our babies were up at 5:30.
Yeah.
And we're here and we're doing things. But like there isn't, I just keep thinking about how, at least on our community and the resources that we have, is like, how do we start to continue that shift?
And it's interesting that like dual theme we've been talking about of both, like, it's not all about an expert. Like, there's no one size fits all. I often say about all of these books and blogs and Instagram feeds, just if someone was like, it's all pretty gray and every baby's different, no one would like buy their stuff. You know, like you can't sell a book being like, sleep's pretty complicated, try something. You know, like
we should.
Like, the rest is blank pages.
Yeah,
to be really honest, and then everyone's an expert. Nobody, if your baby is not sleeping, the person on the park bench with you is not saying like, here's something we tried that maybe would only work for some babies, but we tried it and it worked for ours. Maybe it would work for yours. No, we did this. It's the only way. Do not stop all the others. Read this book. It will change your life. And then when you either don't read it because intuitively you know that's just not for you, or you read half of it and you got too tired, or you try it a little bit, like, or you full on try it and it doesn't work, now you're the problem. Even a little bit your baby's the problem.
And we just have a weird culture about a lot of this stuff.
I
mean, like we started from the beginning, right? Like if you're going to be pregnant, you need to be pregnant like this.
And because of this. And,
Or even, let's start even before that. If you want to get pregnant,
you need to do it this way.
Right? Get this
if you're not getting pregnant, here's the either supplement or medicine or like treatments. You got to clear those chakras. You got, like the space that's just like it. Some of this is just crap luck, people. Like, and
there are plenty of humans that were created on
without eating a lot of pineapple.
Yeah.
But
That's true.
It's a complicated thing because you're talking about like forums where people are like, well, this is it and this is it. In a way, it's like, oh my God, it would be amazing to have a neutral, objective moderator. We're never going to have that. On the other hand, there's way more wisdom than maybe a lot of experts would bring, because a lot of experts know one thing. They don't know the full gamut. So I think there's a practice, and again, like this is something I must practice as well, of being like, all of these are suggestions. What lands for me? What lands for my family? What land, like of just even like sort of trying it on. I mean, sleep is repeatedly my example because it's something that just like polarizes people in every direction. Everything everyone's doing except for them is terribly wrong. And like they're the only ones who got it right, if they got it right. Rather than like babies have a wide range of how they sleep at different times. And a lot of, if some method worked, it kind of is luck. And what you have to find is something that works for you. And for most people, the problem is that there are responsibilities and obligations and work in our lives that we are not supposed to be doing when we have a baby this small. You're supposed to have relatives taking care of your baby with you for a year,
Yeah.
And if it feels absolutely impossible, it's actually because you're set up. Set up.
And I would go further that my new soapbox, Becca, is if one more person tells me like, oh, you have, the baby and, about a year later, I'm like, no.
Nothing ends.
No. I think about the year you're pregnant, we can round up.
Yeah.
40 weeks is 10 months, by the way. If somebody keeps telling me 9 months, I'm like, 40 weeks is 10 months. That's not 9.
Right.
Do the math. Okay, there's that. Round up to a year. Then the first 3 years, right? You have a very small person
who is so dependent on you
for 3 years on the average, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the average of what it is we're talking about. Then at about 3 to 3.5, there is most of the time some openings of like shifts and independence and like what this little person is now.
Depends on the kid. You got your neurodivergent kid.
Yeah, you got all of the things.
Yeah.
You got all the options. Just, on average.
Right.
That's usually what we're talking about. But we don't talk about that early parenthood experience of really being like conception, and I would even go as far as like 5.
Yeah.
Like we don't talk about it as like a 6-year experience.
Right.
And that in itself is setting people up for this like, well, I'm supposed to be like done.
Well, yeah, and what if we acknowledge to people that when you are in that life stage, there's a lot of things that need to come off your plate.
A lot
of other things that need to come off your plate.
Or you have to get
need to get a lot of support, whether that is family, community, people you pay, you're in general, when people decide to add a kid to their family and or there's a surprise add, your plate was already full. People are not like sitting around being like, what do I do with all this time and money? I don't know what to do.
That hasn't happened to me, but
in general,
generally speaking,
again.
that could. I mean,
and we don't acknowledge as a society, like, let me step back. I mean, even career-wise for people, to not in a way that's like, well, they'll be kind of absent for a while, but just being like, no, this is a life stage. You are not meant to shift your career dramatically forward unless you're you and somehow you have 1 million hours in your day.
No.
But you have a tremendous amount of support.
I have a ton.
You have more support than most people that I know.
do.
And that has enabled you to trust that your children are being loved and held when they're not physically in your presence at all times.
Correct.
And that is a gift.
It's a gift. And you have to be able to like, and it's weird, right? Because you only know what you know and you know it. But like having now retrospective, having a youngest of 4, she started preschool last week, which is amazing.
Picture her as so little.
I know she's a little night. Now she's walking herself to preschool. But there's now, right, as you've done it a couple times, right, that, well, like I know the walk from the car to preschool is like, I do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I really want this time.
Right.
Because I know now, like I know enough to know that like this window is
away.
like, it's so small. It's so small.
That's the other, just to name the like excruciating push-pull of parenting, is that part of you, forget that every moment is like perfect blessing. Part of you is like, I am like joining the circus and moving to Thailand. Like I just need my own space. I cannot breathe. Mm-mm. And part of you is like, and that's not separately. They're actually happening at the same time.
All of it's happening at the same time.
And Yeah, it just, nothing is black and white in any of this. And if we just got like way more honest with ourselves and each other about what this is actually like, and that the struggle is not, I don't know, the struggle is not which pacifier to buy. The struggle is deeper. It's like, how do I know when I'm where I should be? And how do I get myself and my child and my family through the tough moments? And how do I believe in this? Yeah, while having the crazy push-pull.
Yeah, because
That's
but you're
struggle,
talking
man.
about a level of self-awareness.
Let's
that
do it.
Is
I know.
so necessary. You and I are on
so
board.
necessary.
Like, man, the self-awareness train, I want to be on it all the time. But it is one of those pieces where I'm like, when I'm around people who I'm like, ooh, like, I wish for you that you would just do that. Like, you know it. Like, you know it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like how does that get built? Because if we as the raisers of these small, tiny humans aren't trying to figure some of that out, then we have this wondering too of why sometimes like the kiddos aren't necessarily having some of that as well. Right. And so babies, you want to, right. Like if you want to know,
you're going to be taught like mindfulness.
You want to know about yourself?
Yeah.
You hold a baby.
Yeah.
Because they know.
They know you better than you know yourself.
They're fascinating. And that's, you know, really great. At the same time, you're right that, you know, starting from families from the beginning, you get to see. Yeah. You get to see it from a different perspective. And I guess like, you know, thinking about where we've gone in this conversation, what do you see like as we're not just necessarily moving forward, but like what's going on right now, you know, in the amount of worlds that you're in that you feel like is some places where we need to spend some more time, you know, and there's a lot of good things going on too. Like it is bleak, but at the same time, there's a lot of energy going on right now.
There's like a, you know, people are kind of like waking up and looking around and being like, so this isn't working.
Yeah. No, it's not working.
And I think my wish for what could come from this, and I can talk a little bit about where that would need to happen a little bit in my view, is for people to just start having more spaces to like actually welcome themselves in and welcome their truth in. That can be therapy. Sure. That can be coaching. That can be, you know, a little more space for that in relationships. Sometimes just looking at your partner and being like, this is hard, right? Hard for you too? Cool. We on the same page, you know, like is helpful. My work and part of my perspective is I would love for this to come like from a softening within the system and that the medical system. And that doesn't mean necessarily fewer interventions, but I think, you know, one of the things that I felt really passionate about is educating providers and nurses and the people you're interacting with the whole pregnancy and the whole postpartum and your pediatrician in how to make a little bit more space, how to like be, you know, like how to know it won't take more time to actually let a person in, to actually see them, to soothe them. And as you said, that takes people doing a little bit of that for themselves. Like it's this, you know, we're just planting seeds. And part of it is for every parent who's a little bit more self-aware and making a little more space for themselves. You're giving that to your kids as a model, you know. The change is slow. But the connection of care is now like... Yeah,
we have, if people want to talk about data or all the things, like we have all of the scientific information about it now. And so now I'm excited, and I think you are too, that we get to like apply it to humanity and like really, okay, cool, we have the numbers. So now what are we going to do with the humans? And what you're speaking about is real, because you and I being the people that we are, I think about the amount of times that I've walked into rooms for my own care, and I know the person who just walked in is not okay.
Right.
And I'm like, ooh, okay, I really only want 7 minutes then.
Right.
Because this person,
actually, it's plenty of you. Like, do what you got to do.
Yeah, I got to go. Yeah. This is, so you're right that modeling of what this can be and what this can look like is going to start.
Yeah.
Some of that with
little bits. And I think there's an implosion. I hope, a little bit of an implosion of the like perfectionist culture that I see happening. Part of it is these mommy blogs where people are like, guys, this kind of sucks. You know, like that is an important first step. You know, like there is maybe a couple people at the park willing to be like, oh, actually, sleep's always kind of hard. You know, like there's like some little chinks in this, like,
Yep. Or actually, it's not you or your babe. It's that it's that you're supposed to work full time and while do this. Like you're supposed to, you know, you do this and you do that, and that's part of what is challenging. You're crushing it because we're at the park at 8:47.
Because you're breathing and your baby's, you know, like. And that's not low expectation. It's actually this is what humans are supposed to be doing right now. It's supposed to be like this a little bit.
Is there any last things you want to tell us while you're on the mic?
Just go easy on yourselves, people. Like you are, like you said, you're probably doing better than you think. Yeah. And like sometimes it just takes a pause to be like, what helps me feel like me? Like a piece of parenthood pulls you out of yourself a lot. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need a mimosa and a manicure. Self-care can be something very different. And like taking a moment for yourself will fill you up to have more.
Do it. Yeah, I'm going to maybe take a moment now after we're done with this. Like, because it's true. We need to do those things. Yeah. What are the moments? Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being here today and talking. And we'll have to keep talking more.
We just will.
More. Yeah, we just will. So thank you so much for listening to Key to the Bridge.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Key to the Bridge, a podcast brought to you by your friends at Keystone Therapy and Training Services. I'm your host, Erica Bosque. Key to the Bridge is recorded and produced by Jeff Henderson and Brian Henderson. This is a podcast for everyone.